So you waste time on your big dream, then you get scammed by your teeth. Drop in, drop out, it's a good plan. Soft core summertime, I get up there. Now I can't come back in a cold sweat. So fuck the what's next. Don't cash it back, check.
You're on a date with an eligible bachelor. He's nice, he's cute, he's sweet. He pays for your meal. You start thinking about the future with this man, what it must like to be to have a house, 2 children, a picket fence. And then you realize that neither one of you have your shit together. He has student debt. You have no idea where you're going to be in the next 2 years. And you sit down and you look to each other, trying to lighten the mood, realizing that you can't even potentially plan what this potential relationship would be. It's pretty hot this summer. It's going to be the coolest one of our lives. I say all this to say that it's the most frustrating thing to be a young person nowadays because there is so few goals that you can ever hope to meet. And I don't say this as someone who is pessimistic because I am a dogged optimist. I will be working my ass off to pretend as though I can reach the goals that I want. However, I also have to be realistic. In a world where majority of the people whom I meet will have some significant student debt, regardless of whether or not they finished their college degree. In a world where the first starter home that you can buy is over $100,000. In a world where to be able to manage a house and a home, you now need 2 incomes, which means that you now need to introduce childcare. And realizing that even from my own experience of being a survivor of childcare abuse, you don't want that for your children. And realizing you might not have an option because of either they eat or they may be exposed to abuse. The fact that we're in a world right now where it's really like this wonderful houses remix. But the what's next going, catch those back checks.
So fuck the what's next. Go and cash your bad check.
It's moments like this when you can only laugh so that you don't cry. I think that being raised on the cusp of being a millennial and being probably the oldest of Generation Z/Zoomers has made me realize just how fucked we all are. Because it'd be one thing if it was just societal collapse through like the late stage capitalism. It would be one thing if it was just that. It seems like we're also now experiencing the fallout of climate change, and people are still arguing whether or not we should be doing anything towards it. To the extent that there was, it came out in the news recently that ExxonMobil executives were doing.
So I recorded this before I saw the Vox article about how climate change is a lot worse than we could have ever hoped for it to be because we most likely will not be able to keep it under 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so here, enjoy the fire because it's going to be what we're experiencing for the next generation.
Executives do, and talking about how much value they added to their shareholders at the cost of literally billions of lives because of how much they realize oil is responsible for climate change. And sitting here at the cusp of what I want to deem true adulthood, when my prefrontal cortex is completely developed, and realizing that even as I meet new people and develop new relationships, that being able to plan in the long term for these relationships is a lot more difficult than I would like it to be, because we are no longer going to be following the gender roles that were what was expected from our parents and even grandparents. And being completely independent is not truly possible in a society where to live a good life, you really do need 2 incomes. But that doesn't leave room for the idea of even adding more people to the mix, because you're both working 40 hours a week, if that. You're both like trying to understand the other person in addition to having everything else. Like managing a home takes effort, okay? It's not just chores. It's also interior decorating. It's figuring out what you're gonna eat. It's making sure that you connect and continue to connect with each other's families. And then to bring a child into that, knowing that the world is literally in the process of melting from the inside out because of climate change, just seems cruel. I want to be optimistic about this because it's not as though babies have stopped being born. They're not being born at the rate that people want them to, but they are still being born. And I think children are a wonderful addition to any family. I think the most frustrating thing in this entire thing is that, are we doing our children a service by giving them life in this world? There have been whispers of American decline since the end of World War II. And I don't blame them. The US rose to prominence because the whole of Europe was down bad. I'm not using that term correctly, am I? I'm getting old. The whole point is, at the end of World War II, Europe had to rebuild, and the US became a manufacturing giant. But as close as the 60s, again, a lot of change happened in the 60s. The US started to lose its edge, and by the 80s, it was becoming increasingly clear that the US was a consumer economy, not something that was going to continue to manufacture, and that mantle was taken up by China, which ironically is now our biggest competitor. And for good reason. I don't blame them for taking the space, because the US has cheapened the value of labor for the past couple of decades, weakened unions, and stripped whatever social security nets used to exist. But the chickens are coming home to roost, and it is terrifying to watch in slow motion as any semblance of a life that you could have had. A life that would have been boring, but would have been stable. Flash past your eyes in things that may or may not be impossible. I am not saying this to be an alarmist. I am saying this because it is true. People are being priced out of the market of buying houses. As I speak right now, I'm currently looking to buy my first house, and I would have to save at least 5 years to even have 10% to put down on some of the houses I want to do. And these are starter homes. Starter homes. I think to myself of all of the issues that are coming down as what you would call American cultural decline. Some blame it on the Marxists, others blame it on the pace of change, because even though humans and Americans are amazing, we're slow to adapt. And the impending AI crisis that is coming on as automation replaces most of the jobs that we even have today, including jobs you previously thought wouldn't be able to be replaced. This is a sort of, for me, a playback on a couple of topics I would love to do more research on, especially about American decline, because if there's anything that has been whispered about it, Chris Hedges is an excellent person to listen to. What we used to call democracy, climate change, and the rising prominence of inequality and income inequality specifically, I think it's a worthwhile topic to explore, and I think I'm going to make a couple of videos describing just how deep the problem is, because at this point in time, I really don't have any answers other than to fundamentally burn it all to the ground. Thank you for watching. I've been ranting and raving for the past couple of minutes, so give me some feedback. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment, like or dislike, subscribe. More of my ranting lunacy is on its way. Thank you so much.
What's next? Don't cash your back checks.